Hey everyone, and welcome to the Odd Duckling. In this episode, we will basically just be doing a bit of an overview. An overview about what you can expect. This podcast, as the title suggests, is about career, life, and everything in between. With one more word that I kind of avoided saying now, and it's a bit of a divisive word. There's some connotation there that might be very, very positive or very, very negative for you. And I think that is extremely important to talk about because this is why I chose to use it. A neurodivergent, what does that even mean? If you look it up, you'll find multiple different explanations. A lot of them are around, well, mental health, yes. ADHD and autism are easily falling under this definition, and with the rise of late diagnosis for adults, especially women with ADHD, this has become quite the subject. So it's easier for us to talk about these ones, and it's easier for us to start understanding what neurodivergency means. And I'm not going to tell you that this next definition is going to be the most correct one, the most absolute one, but it's going to be my definition. And by that extent, it would also reflect what I'm trying to achieve with this podcast. So the way I see it, we've all been raised a certain way. Depending on what era you were born in, you might have been more or less directed. Depending on which country you're in, you might have been taught certain systems or others. But the bottom line is, there's what they call neurotypical way to behave, there's a neurotypical way to react, and there's a neurotypical way to work, study, and exist. And we do that because as a society, we needed to survive. But as the time evolved, we actually, survival is still there, don't get me wrong, but it's not requiring the same skills as it did 50 years ago or 100 years ago, and definitely not more than that. But we are, to some extent, only now starting to shed some of these ways. And a neurodivergent person would usually, in my opinion, be a person who used these methods that he's been taught, and either really, really struggled with them and had felt it was a very heavy experience for him, or they took it on, and in some cases it worked, in some cases it didn't, and they failed. They couldn't do some of it. So it's either masking or failing. In a nutshell, it's people whose brains function a bit differently. And these people are just different. We've only just now started to talk about this, and this is where this podcast kind of come in. I think there's a big wave of people talking about it, about mental health in workspace and about careers, and the fact that being different and the fact that your brain works different doesn't mean you can't make it in a career and you can't not burn out because your work works differently. You just kind of need to take a minute with yourself and realize, maybe this sort of method is not working the way my brain is working. And to that extent, you have a lot of pages that are amazing, like one of my favorite YouTube pages, one of my favorite YouTube channels is How to ADHD, which I started watching before I got the diagnosis for my own ADHD, but already found it very useful. So people are starting to talk about tips and tricks and things that they are doing that not necessarily are the normal. They're not necessarily weird either. But for me, this was an amazing moment, because once I started looking at all of these tools, I started realizing I don't have to work a certain way. I started kind of letting myself be who I am and leverage that. And that's kind of what I want to continue here. I want us to be talking about how you as people work with your mental hardships, whether they are actually your brain functioning a certain way, or maybe it's about going through an experience that has impacted you quite a bit and how it impacted your career and what you did to make it work for you, because it's not easy and we're all going through this. And it's also bringing me to the next point. So the people that we'll be interviewing here, they're not necessarily calling themselves neurodivergent. In a lot of cases, they might have some suspicion. They might even just not care. For a lot of people, having these acronyms, this diagnosis is very meaningful, but it's not like that for everybody. I think it's important to note that it's not a criteria for anyone to interview here. You don't need to be diagnosed. You don't need to self-diagnose even if you don't want it. You just need to come here, tell us about your experience, and share some of the tools, because that's why we're here. We are here to help each other. And when people started asking me about this, but I don't know if I'm neurodivergent, I don't have any diagnosis, they also started saying, but everybody has this, right? And to an extent, that's right, which brings me to 2 more points that I think are very, very relevant. Because after asking that, they're also kind of saying, so it's not like my employer needs to do anything or treat me special. And I completely agree with that one. I don't want to be taken as like a failure just because I carry some sort of a diagnosis or some sort of an acronym like ADHD. And again, absolutely agree, because you are not less capable. You are just working differently. There's ups and downs to it. Some positions will absolutely benefit from you having ADHD, and some will just benefit from the fact that you are a grown person who handled certain hardships because you learned from it and you grew. And we are all people and we are all diverse and we have something to bring to the table. It's just about learning how to do that. And that's where responsibility kind of comes in. Because when we look at that and we're looking at career, we're talking about what do we expect our employers to do? And to be honest, I don't expect much. And I've been very lucky with my employers. They've been amazing responses to my needs. At the time, I had no indication towards myself that I would be calling myself neurodivergent. But even when I started having a little bit of problem and I needed some guidance or some help or some flexibility, it's something that I got. And I think the reason I got it, it's not because I am special or less than or broken. It's because they are people and they realize that everybody has their moment of weakness, their moment of need, and everything a company just needs to do to make sure they get the best out of any employee, not just neurodivergent, is just show flexibility. So whenever we do talk about awesome things that companies did, or if we talk about things that they might have not done in an awesome way, take into consideration that the limit to what the baseline for me is, that the limit of what I expect companies to do, and to my knowledge, most of the people I've talked to so far, is just flexibility, just the awareness that we are all human and that we need people to be reactive to us. They just need to realize that our brains and everybody's brains or everybody's needs might be different. I think when we are talking about the responsibility here, we are talking not just about the responsibility of the employer. We are also very strongly talking about the responsibility of an employee. And the reason that kind of comes up is because it kind of, to be honest, I just got this question quite a bit. I don't know if I can explain to you where exactly it's coming from, but a lot of these people are like, but what if somebody is using what you're saying to assume neurodivergent means weak or less than? And that's not the case. That's never what we're saying. Or what if basically what you're telling the employers is that they'd better hire someone without a neurodivergency because, it's easier. But that's not the case. I think that's the point. Everybody has issues, and neurodivergent people bring to the table something else. So it's a balance. It's not about more or less. It's just about how and when. And to that extent, the responsibility from the neurodivergent person is to understand their limits, to understand their abilities, and to not only convey that, but also do something about it. Because the bottom line is, as an employer, you want to have a good employee. You want them to be happy, be it because it's a person that you like and you hired and you spend like 8 hours a day with, or because, you want your company to actually make money, which honestly is sensible. But as an employee, you come there because you have your own ambitions. This is your career. You want to do something. And I think this kind of hidden contract that needs to be there is that we figure out what the best way for us to function is. And we figure out how to communicate it in a way that expectations are aligned, but the responsibility of choosing the right job for you and choosing how to handle it is more on the employee than it is on the employer. And the responsibility of taking over ownership over your project, communicating what your abilities are and aligning on that, they are definitely on the employee and not on the employer. But to be honest, we all know that. We all love that. We want that ownership. We want people to trust us. That's what we're asking. We're asking for flexibility and trust, because if you trust me that I am taking ownership over this, and with that in mind, these are things that you need to kind of take with you as you keep going into the next interview and the one after that. Because in some of these cases, we won't stop and talk about the fact that, yeah, this is my responsibility. We might talk about some hardship that happened here or there, but this is always going to be in the background. So when we talk about people having a hard time, it doesn't mean they don't understand that this is something that they need to own and they need to carry and they need to an extent, solve, even if it's solving by asking for help. So with that in mind, yeah, honestly, there's not much more to say. The values that we carry here, and I hope are rather clear, is that we want to reduce the shame. We want to be able to talk about the bad things and not just about the hyper focus when I have ADHD. Sorry if it's ADHD focused here. It's not just about ADHD. It's actually a very important point. This conversation is, I have a feeling that the first conversations might have a lot of people with ADHD, but they might also have additional things and might only feel comfortable saying that they have ADHD, or, it's just a happenstance and that happens. But this is, as I said, a place to reduce the shame, a place to stop talking about how afraid we are to say, I'm having a hard time. I am a great employee. I love my career. That's actually very, very much true. But I'm also going through something. And I think it's going to be nice if you don't have to hide. Because a lot of time, just the fact that you need to hide that you're going through something takes so much energy that it just makes things harder. And so we reduce shame and we talk about all of these things. And we talk about the fact that we're not alone. And another thing that's really important to note is we talk about the fact that there are people out there experiencing hard things, and they can do it. They reach C-level positions, they reach management positions, they work technical positions or artistic positions, they help people as nurses and doctors and whatnot, and they do all of these things, not despite, but because they learned how to use how their brain function to their benefit, and by happenstance also to their employer's benefit. We're also going to talk about work-life balance because, to be honest, if we don't want to burn out, everybody has to have some sort of work-life balance. And lastly, creating visibility, bringing knowledge, making sure that you have more tools than you had before you started an episode. That's my aim, and I hope we can reach it. Lastly, before I part ways, I just want to give a few disclaimers. First one, this is my first time recording everything. A lot of the people interviewing with me will have this as an experience of first time. We really, really want your feedback. We want your opinion with the understanding that we are here trying something and it might not be perfect. We're not experts on a lot of the things that we are going to be talking about. We are talking about things that impacted our own lives, and we might have some knowledge about it, and it might be crooked if we've made a mistake, if we've said something that doesn't make sense, or if there's something you want to react to. I promise you we're not anger baiting anything. Anything said here is an honest to God opinion, something that's happened during a conversation, and if it reached you, then I didn't notice it was a problem. And I would really appreciate it if you highlighted it so that I can do something about it and fix it in the future. Additionally, with feedback, this is something that's still rather new to me. I'm new at doing these interviews, and I'm new at doing the social media for this podcast, and I'm new at literally recording myself and putting myself out there. I'm aware that this is not perfect. I'm doing my very best to make it as perfect as I can, but also perfect is the enemy of done. And as a person that, works on products, I'm not going to make it perfect. I'm just going to get it out. And that means if one interview was not great, please leave a comment. The flow was not good enough, or if you felt like there were questions that should have been asked, tell me. I'll learn from it. I'll get better. That's exactly why I'm here. I'm expecting the first 10 episodes to be quite a mess. Please bear with me. Please help me. This is, if nothing else, me trying to help someone, and any help the other direction would be appreciated. Speaking of help, there's one more thing you can do for me, and that is we want to reach people. This is a very, very new experience. This is something that's just coming out. So if you could share, like, follow, all of the above, any of the pages, any of the content, I promise I'm here for the long run, so there will be more, and the more you react, the more I make it, better, and to your liking, hopefully. But stick with me for just a bit. If it works for you, I would highly appreciate that. And I hope I can cut this part off, in a month from now when the page is absolutely full of likes. But to be honest, there's no point in which I would say I don't want any other people to listen to this. I want everybody to be learning about this, honestly, as much as possible. So that being said, my name is Daria. This is Odd Ducklings, and I hope to see you on my next episode, where I will be talking a bit more about the research that was done for this podcast. I've talked to about 40 people from across the world. I think by some good insights, as well as some of my story that you might find interesting regarding why this started and what I believe is important about this. That being said, whether you help me or not, whether you like this or not, I hope you have an amazing day, an amazing rest of the week, or a weekend if that's what it is for you. And thank you for getting this far. See ya.